In 1957, a Japanese car arrived on American soil for the very first time. It overheated within minutes. It vibrated so violently that drivers couldn't hear their own radio. Within 3 years, it was pulled from the market in complete humiliation. 68 years later, that same company sells more vehicles than any other automaker on Earth. Over 10 million a year, in every country, on every continent. So what changed? It wasn't a better engine. It wasn't a bigger factory. It wasn't even a car. The thing that turned Toyota from a national embarrassment into the most powerful car company in human history was a wooden machine built in 1924 to weave fabric, a trip to an American grocery store, and a man who sacrificed his own career to save a company he'd built from nothing. This is the story they don't teach you in business school. Late 1800s, a remote village in rural Japan. A young boy named Sakichi Toyoda sits in the corner of a dimly lit room, watching his mother work. Her hands move across a manual wooden loom, back and forth, for 14, sometimes 16 hours a day. Her fingers are calloused, her back is hunched, her eyes are tired, and Sakichi can't stop watching one specific thing. Every few minutes, a single thread snaps, and his mother has to stop, find the break, and start over. He decides he's going to fix it. In 1890, at just 23 years old, Sakichi builds his first invention, a wooden hand loom that increases weaving efficiency by 40 to 50%. It's crude. It's powered entirely by hand. But it works, and it sparks an obsession that will consume the next 34 years of his life. By 1924, after decades of refinement, Sakichi unveils his masterpiece, the Toyota Type G automatic loom. And this machine doesn't just weave faster, it does something no machine in human history had ever done before. It thinks. If a single thread snaps, even one out of thousands, a tiny mechanical sensor detects it instantly, and the entire machine shuts itself down. No defected fabric, no wasted material, no supervisor needed. Sakichi called it Jidoka, automation with a human touch. One worker could now operate dozens of machines at once because every machine policed itself. This was so revolutionary that in 1929, a British textile giant called the Platt Brothers offered to buy the patent for £100,000, roughly $15 million in today's money. Sakichi accepted. But he didn't keep the money. He handed every pound to his son, Kiichiro, with a single instruction. The age of the loom is ending. The age of the automobile is beginning. Take this money, build a Japanese car, and don't come back if you fail. Sakichi died the following year. He never saw what happened next. Kiichiro Toyoda had a problem. His father had just given him a fortune to build a car company in a country that didn't make cars, in a market completely dominated by American giants Ford and General Motors, who together were producing 8,000 vehicles every single day. Toyota, by comparison, would build their first prototype in a corner of the family loom factory, by hand. In 1933, 3 years later, they unveiled their first passenger car, the Model AA. And to mark this new chapter, they held a public competition to redesign the company logo. The winning entry didn't just change the design, it changed the name. Toyota, the family name, became Toyota. Why? Because in Japanese, Toyota takes exactly 8 brush strokes to write, and in Japanese culture, 8 is the luckiest number you can possibly have. They were going to need every ounce of that luck, because just as Toyota started to find its footing, World War II detonated across the Pacific. The Japanese government banned passenger car production overnight. Toyota was forced to pivot to building military trucks for the Imperial Army. And as the war dragged on and resources vanished, those trucks got stripped down to almost nothing. One headlight in the middle of the hood, wooden cargo beds, front brakes removed entirely. They were rolling skeletons. When the war ended in 1945, Japan was in ruins, cities flattened, economy destroyed. And by 1950, hyperinflation had pushed Toyota to the brink of total bankruptcy. They couldn't buy steel. They couldn't pay their workers. So management made a desperate move, mass layoffs and salary cuts. The workers exploded. A bitter labor strike erupted that lasted nearly 2 months. An unthinkable betrayal in a culture where the bond between employer and employee was considered sacred. The banks refused to lend, the unions refused to negotiate. The company was about to die. And then Kiichiro Toyoda did something no Western CEO would ever do. He resigned. The man who had built this company from his father's Loom money, who had defied every expert who said a Japanese car company was impossible, walked into a boardroom and took the full blame himself. He stepped down so his workers could keep their jobs. The strike ended that week. The banks released emergency loans. The Korean War broke out shortly after, flooding Toyota with American military orders, and the company was saved. Kiichiro never saw the recovery. 2 years later, in March 1952, he died of a cerebral hemorrhage at age 57, broken, exhausted, and quietly heartbroken. He never lived to see what his sacrifice built. By 1956, Toyota was alive, but barely. To compete with America, Kiichiro's cousin Eiji Toyoda needed to understand how the Americans were doing it. So he sent his best production engineer, a relentless, obsessive man named Taiichi Ono, on a scouting mission to the United States. Ono's target, the legendary Ford River Rouge complex in Michigan, the crown jewel of global manufacturing, the cathedral of mass production. When Ono arrived, he was stunned by the scale. Ford produced more cars in a single day than Toyota produced in a year. Conveyor belts stretched for miles. Steel poured in one end, finished cars rolled out the other. But the longer Ono watched, the more he saw something nobody else did. Ford was drowning in its own success. Warehouses overflowing with unused parts. Millions of dollars sitting idle in inventory. And worst of all, if a single machine produced a defective part, it would crank out thousands of bad parts before anyone noticed. The American system was massive, it was impressive, and it was completely broken. Toyota didn't have the steel, they didn't have the space, they didn't have the money to copy any of it. Ono needed a completely different way to build cars, and he found it in the last place anyone would have looked: a grocery store. While walking through an American supermarket called Piggly Wiggly, Ono stopped dead in the aisle. Japan didn't have self-service supermarkets yet, so he just stood there watching. He watched a customer pick up exactly one box of cereal. Just one, not 10. Not a whole pallet, one. Then, a few minutes later, a stock clerk came by and replaced exactly one box on the shelf. That was it. That was the answer. The American factories were using a push system. Make as much as possible, as fast as possible, and hope someone buys it. But the supermarket used a pull system, only replaced what's actually been used. Nothing more, nothing wasted. Ono flew back to Japan and tore Toyota's entire factory apart. He eliminated the warehouses. He instituted a system he called Kanban, just in time. Parts arrived at the assembly line at the exact moment they were needed. Not a day earlier, not an hour earlier. The exact moment. And then he resurrected his grandfather's Loom philosophy. He hung a physical rope, an and-on cord, over every single station on the assembly line. And he gave every worker, from the master engineer to the new hire tightening bolts, the absolute authority to pull that rope and shut down the entire factory if they saw a single defect. In Detroit, stopping the line was a fireable offense. In Detroit, volume was king. At Toyota, quality was king. And every problem was solved the moment it appeared, not buried in the trunk of a finished car. They called this relentless philosophy Kaizen, continuous improvement, forever. Now, Toyota was ready to leave the island. In 1957, Toyota loaded its first passenger car onto a cargo ship bound for California. They called it the Toyopet Crown. They expected a triumph. What they got was a catastrophe. The Toyopet had been engineered for the slow, muddy, unpaved back roads of post-war Japan. So the moment Americans drove it onto a U.S. interstate highway, the engine overheated. The chassis vibrated so violently that passengers couldn't hold a conversation. American drivers called it a toy by 1960. Toyota was hemorrhaging money in the U.S. They withdrew the Toyopet from the market entirely. Fewer than 2,000 had been sold. It was the worst failure in the company's history. But remember, at Toyota, failure isn't failure. Failure is just data. For the next 5 years, Toyota engineers quietly traveled across America. They drove the highways. They timed the commutes. They sat in diners and asked truckers what they wanted in a car. They studied the American driver like an anthropologist studies a tribe. And in 1964, they returned. Not with the Toyopet, but with a brand new car called the Corona. The Corona was powerful enough for highway speeds. It had air conditioning. It started in the cold. And in 1966, they followed it with a smaller, cheaper sibling that would become legendary, the Corolla. But Detroit didn't notice. Detroit was too busy building massive V8 muscle cars. Why would any American want a tiny four-cylinder Japanese car? The OPEC oil embargo hit. Overnight, gas prices quadrupled. Lines at American gas stations stretched for miles. And the massive, gas-guzzling Detroit land yachts that defined American masculinity became financial liabilities almost overnight. Suddenly, every American family on Earth wanted exactly what Toyota had spent a decade quietly perfecting: a small, cheap, reliable, fuel-efficient car that would not break down. Toyota's just-in-time system meant they could scale production faster than anyone else on the planet. Corolla sales rocketed. The Japanese invasion had officially begun, and Detroit would never recover. By 1983, Toyota had conquered the economy car market, but there was one mountain they hadn't climbed. The global luxury market, Mercedes-Benz, BMW, Jaguar, was a fortress controlled by a tiny European cartel. And the idea that a Japanese company could ever compete in that space was considered, frankly, laughable. In August of 1983, Chairman Eiji Toyoda called a top-secret meeting of his best engineers. He asked them one question, a question so audacious it bordered on arrogant. Can we build the best car in the world? The project was codenamed F1 Flagship 1. It would take 6 years, $1 billion, 50 clay models, 450 vehicle prototypes, 900 engine prototypes. Test cars covered over 4 million kilometers of driving. For comparison, that's more than 10 round trips to the moon. In 1989, Toyota launched the result, Lexus. And when the Lexus LS400 arrived in American showrooms, it broke the luxury industry in half. It was quieter than a Mercedes, smoother than a Rolls-Royce, more aerodynamic than a BMW. Cadillac engineers actually disassembled one and concluded the car could not have been built using existing American manufacturing technology. And because of Toyota's relentless manufacturing efficiency, they sold it for $30,000 less than the German competition. The luxury hierarchy that had stood for a century collapsed in a single product launch. But Toyota's biggest gamble was still coming. In the mid-1990s, while every other automaker on Earth was doubling down on bigger engines and faster cars, Toyota quietly poured billions into a technology everyone else thought was a joke. A car powered by 2 engines at the same time. One gasoline, one electric. In December 1997, they launched the Prius. Competitors openly mocked it. Ugly, slow, a science experiment. GM's CEO at the time famously dismissed hybrids as a fad, but Toyota was playing a game nobody else could see. By the time Tesla launched its first car a decade later, Toyota had already sold over 1 million Priuses, built the global supply chain for hybrid batteries, and trained an entire generation of consumers to accept electrified driving. The ugly science experiment had silently invented the future. Toyota isn't perfect. In 2009, a massive unintended acceleration scandal led to the recall of nearly 9 million vehicles and a $1.2 billion fine. Their reputation was shaken to its core. But here's what most people miss about that crisis. Toyota's response wasn't denial. It was Kaizen. They pulled the end-on cord on themselves. They stopped. They studied. They fixed it. And they got back to building. Today, when you drive a Toyota, whether it's a 30-year-old Corolla with 300,000 miles on the odometer or a brand new hybrid gliding silently down the highway, you're not just driving a piece of metal. You're driving a wooden loom built in 1924 to ease a mother's pain. You're driving a trip to an American grocery store in 1956. You're driving the resignation of a CEO who walked away from his own company to save the workers inside it. And you're driving the unshakable belief of a Japanese boy named Sakichi. A boy who looked at his exhausted mother and decided that machines should serve people, not the other way around. He never built a car. But everything that drives on Earth today drives because of him.